When God asks you to go long, it's because he is setting you up for a huge play. Grace and peace, everybody. Welcome to Sabbath School Study Group. My name is Chris Bailey. This is part number 1 of our 5-part series, Practical Prayer. And what do we do when our prayers seem unanswered? That is a question and an answer you can find in the life of Elkanah and Hannah. That's why we kick it off here in 1 Samuel chapter 1. 1 Samuel chapter 1, verse number 3. And this man, this was Elkanah, went up out of his city yearly to worship. Please note that. Yearly to worship and to sacrifice unto the Lord of hosts in Shiloh. By the way, who was in charge of the sanctuary when he was doing this? And the 2 sons of Eli, Hophni and Phinehas, the priests of the Lord, were there. Now, not only is Elkanah continuing to worship, because as we find out in the story, a little bit down later in the chapter, he and his wife, who, by the way, they had another wife involved. So this is one man married to 2 women, and he's still going to church every year to worship. And the wife, Hannah, is unable to bear a child. So that's the context of the story. But he continues to worship year by year, even though Hophni and Phinehas, who we learn in the scriptures, were causing a mess in the church. This shows us that Elkanah and Hannah, they were invested in a long play. Sometimes what God is trying to do is of such a magnitude, is of such a depth, even a width or breadth, that it requires time. And it's not a time in order for him to figure out what he's going to do, but really it takes time in order to prepare us and to position us for what he's going to do. So I use the term, going long. If you're familiar with the game of football, the longer the play, the further out the receiver has to go, the longer it takes for them to get there. And we call that the deep ball. And everyone, even if you're not familiar with the sport, when we see it happen, there's something in our mind that says, that's amazing. That's great. Because it took all of that time and all that preparation, and the payoff is that much sweeter. That's what happens oftentimes when we're required to wait. And what can happen on the other side of that wait? Well, why don't you encourage us? Can you share a testimony of a prayer that took years to answer, but God finally came through? We'd love to hear it. Put that in the comments below. And if you want to hear the rest or the end of this story, make sure you watch the whole 5-part study, not just the playlist. It's the whole study right here in this video.